What I have to say now is more so spiritual than practical, so to speak. So I'm going to go ahead and put these words out there, and I'm sure you probably heard it in some way, form, or fashion from somebody else, and I'm fine with that. So I'll just be another one added to the list. But people, you have to understand, times are different. I hear people talk all the time about, I wish things would, I'll be glad when things go back to the way they were before the pandemic. It ain't going to happen, people. See, things happen in history that change the whole dynamic, change the zeitgeist, change the society as a whole. And that change is permanent. And those changes have been made because of the pandemic. So whatever life you had before then, you might get a few of those things back, but it's not going to be exactly the same. It's not. People's mindsets have changed. They're starting to think more for themselves. You still have some sheeple wandering around, but those numbers are starting to slowly diminish because we're in a position now where we're literally having to wait on our governments to support us. And that could be a scary thing because, if you got to go through the bureaucratic process and that takes time, some of us don't have day to day. Some of us don't have 24 hours before that last meal or before, the sheriff comes to the door. Some of us don't have it. Some of us don't have it before we take our last breath. Some of us just don't have it. So we have to rely on our own resources. And I think for many, many years, it's been a source of dependence on larger organizations, larger governments, larger entities, kind of like a fallback, that cushion to fall back on. Well, now that cushion has been deflated. And some of us more than others. But then there are some of us have been taught at a very young age, take care of yourself. You'd be surprised how many grown folks were not taught that. You'd be surprised how many grown folks came from generations of people who depended on something or somebody else to take care of them, and they instilled that in their own children. Telling them to marry for money, or telling them to get involved in this agency or that agency so you can get a check every month. Being taught that as if it's an actual way to live and that it's guaranteed. And nothing guaranteed. Nothing guaranteed. And a lot of people were not even taught how to do anything for themselves. That's why you have so many uneducated people running around here, not trying to do anything to educate themselves, but the world is steady evolving that requires some kind of education and training, and these people are being left behind. Bottom line, they're being left behind. Even if you have a manufacturing job that requires just some high school education, you're still going to have to level up with your training. You're still going to have to learn the new equipment because the company is going to keep moving on, because the company has to stay competitive. Let's say you're running a business. That's another thing, because I hear people, some people who don't have a formal education talk about that. Oh, well, I have a business. Well, in order to keep that business going and to be able to deal with the clients that you want to deal with to keep the business going, you're going to have to level up on your facilities, on your training, how to deal with technology. You're going to have to deal with certain things in relation to your business. You're going to have to be kept abreast. And if you don't know the meanings of a lot of the the work that's involved, if you don't know the scope, if you don't know the language that's being used, the terminology, you don't know procedure because you hadn't been in school long enough to understand what's going on, then you're stuck having to hire somebody else who does know that information, and see, that's money coming out your pocket that could go towards profit and loss. All of a sudden, you got to pay this person a couple thousand, $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, however you got to pay them in order to do something that you're not trained to do. And that's what they're doing for you. And see, that's what happens when you're not educated. I did a couple of audios previously about people who were too educated and didn't have any common sense, and people who weren't educated and weren't trying to be educated. Both sets of people, they lose. They lose regardless. As life changes, there's going to be some growth. And the bottom line is, if you're not in a position that you want to grow and change and think progressively about your life, don't ask for anything more than what you're getting right now. Because in order for you to level up, in order for you to grow, in order for you to be a part of modern society and roll with the punches, you're going to have to be able to educate yourself. And what this pandemic has done, because of the lockdowns and the cutbacks and everything else, and people having to work from home, people who weren't used to having to deal with technology and not used to some people weren't used to being at home all the time, they were being exposed to things that were in their life that they did not expose themselves to before. They were forced to see those things. The workaholic that was working at the office 60, 70 hours a week and was hardly ever home, all of a sudden had to be home. And when they got home, they had to realize that they had a home, and they had to get to know what was going on in the home and with who. And for some, that was a good thing, and for some, that was a bad thing. Some marriages became better because of the pandemic, and some of them fell apart. Then you have some people that they were working at the factory, doing that same job over and over and over again. They'll sit there and complain about people getting positions, and they've been there longer than they have. That's because those people taking the time to learn a little bit more about the business and took the time to do the extra training, the extra seminars. They had a stronger work ethic than you. And I also did an audio about, time is not a guarantee. I was referring to relationships, but it really refers to jobs too. And I'm going to speak in another audio about how some people are at these jobs and they actually think that they own the place because they've been there for a long period of time. I touched on it in the previous audio. I can't remember which one, but I'm going in detail about that because the older I get, the more and more I see that. They feel because they're getting to retirement age and they've been with a company for a certain amount of years that they're entitled to certain things, and they're becoming bitter behind it because deep down they know it's not going to happen. This life thing is not something where you just sit around and it happens to you. You make life happen. And those are two different types of people who think that way. So, you got to look at these things. But anyway, I'm going to leave you guys with that. Peace to you all.